Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. I'm Bill Horan, along with my co-host, Nassau Community College student, Stacy Raine.
And today we're going to meet a Long Island entrepreneur who started an apparel business in his bedroom and then in a garage and now runs out of a full-scale production shop in East Rockaway.
The company is called Wakes and Waves and would like to introduce you to Anthony Capellupo. He's the founder, the owner, and he doesn't like to admit it, the CEO of the company.
Anthony, welcome to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about Wakes and Waves, how it came about, and how you changed careers to get into that.
Wakes and Waves started about a year and a half ago, and I started down the road of working on Wall Street. When I was at Fairfield U, I ran our school's investment fund for 2 years, and I loved it. Markets are cool. I studied economics, and then I started down the road with several internships and then looking for jobs and things like that. And I felt along the process, it just wasn't for me. I spent my whole life growing up on the water. I've always loved to build, design, and create. And sitting in an office, I felt boxed in. I felt that I longed for something more. I longed for creativity. I longed for freedom. And I longed for a challenge and something that aligned with my ideas in business. So, I thought it would be cool to give people a wearable way to showcase their interests, passions, and then create a product that was built on the island we call home.
And what kind of products would we see if we wanted to know more about Wakes and Waves? Are we buying surfboards, rowboats?
Well, no surfboards, no rowboats, but, wearable items and accessories. So tees, hoodies, hats, handmade bags, totes, all different types of beachwear. Things that can take you whenever you're going down to the waves, on the boat, all things like that.
So were you always interested in creating clothing? Or I know you said you were always interested in Wall Street. You did your school's investment fund, which is, I didn't even know schools had investment funds. But what about clothing? Was that something that always interested you?
I jokingly say, wearable things are a form of art. And you can showcase your interests, your passions by what you wear. I mean, we have to walk around with clothes on. So to me, there's no better way to help identify you and your interests and your passions by what you wear. Branding means things. Branding signifies things, whether it's something politically related, religious related, cartoon related, movie related, Jaws, all things like that. If you wear a Jaws t-shirt, people will be like, hey, maybe this guy's a fisherman. Maybe he just likes Steven Spielberg. Maybe he just likes movies. All things like that. So branding, to me, communicates personalities and identities and values and beliefs. So to me, clothing and accessories and apparel was a way for people to embrace their passions while simultaneously showing who they are wherever they go.
Anthony, if I came to your location, first of all, where is your location? And what would I see? Is this going to be a store like the way we think of it, a Dunkin' Donut or retail outlet? Or is this a factory? Or is this a kiosk?
So it's not a Macy's. It is not a Dick's Sporting Goods. It is a factory, small scale, but it is everything we need. So you'll see our industrial sewing machines, our cutting tools, all the things I can't tell you about, like our patterns and where we order things from and all things like that. But nonetheless, it is our full-scale production facility, each day where we build our items, make everything, and stitches and seams are sewed from start to finish.
And physically, can you tell us where it is?
Physically, it is on Ocean Avenue in East Rockaway.
Okay.
And whatnot. It was formerly a boutique owned by a master dressmaker. So it was kind of cool how when we found out about it, that there was very much a crossover between industries and, whatnot. The only difference I would say is that, with dressmaking is it's often one-off items, sold for a lot of money, whereas my business focuses more on scale and making the same of one item, with, quality and whatnot. But nonetheless, when we first came into the place, there was an old industrial sewing machine in the corner, covered in dust and whatnot. It was my determination to bring it back to life, and we did. And that's how I knew we were meant to be in the right place for our next step as we continue our expansion.
That's pretty cool, and it makes a great background story as your company gets bigger and bigger. And you said you're not Dick's, etc., but Dick started out, I'm sure, as a small entrepreneur. So a few years from now, we may go to Roosevelt Field and see Anthony's, and we'll pull up, and Wakes and Waves will be
you never know.
item.
I mean, it's a journey of a million miles.
There you go.
I love that saying. So tell me about your mission or your goal for the business.
The mission of Wakes and Waves and the vision is, I would say, very different. My goal is to deliver a brand that makes you feel uniquely connected to the sights, sounds, soul of the sea, and the island we call home. So to me, it's very easy to claim you're a brand, a company from here, but not have a product built on the shores that we walk each and every day. And my mission is to bring to life some of the best, most unique, awesome-made items, inspired, built here on the island from start to finish. And it captures you. So some of our bags, for example, have beautiful fabrics with like a burlap on the bottom. One is burlap on the bottom and then a pale blue up at the top with a very nautical, beachy look, rope handle, recessed zipper, navy lining, all things like that. And people tell me, it reminds me of the ocean, the sand on the bottom, the water, the skyline, all things like that. And products that are coming out in 2024 further embrace all that. Some our items have driftwood toggles and things like that that'll be etched in with Wakes and Waves. I do my best to embrace elements of resourcefulness as well. If I find driftwood on the beach, I say, can we get creative in the way, can we cut it up and incorporate it in an unconventional way into what we do? So whether it's a zipper pull, a toggle handle, all things like that. And, the uniqueness allows each product to be somewhat different, so it's not overly mass produced. A big thing I do is I work in small batches. A small batch, maybe 25, 50. I don't do 1,000, minimum order quantity batches like, I guess you could say, established players or big guys, So, the supply chain, very much, I jokingly say, is like, from shore to machine. So I try to keep it as local as possible.
Now, Wakes and Waves, do you have a slogan or something? I think because you seem very good with the words. I was going to ask you if you were an English major or if that's somewhere in your background.
Well, I'm not an English major. I studied economics, which is another passion of mine. And it ties into much of what I do. How can I keep my costs down in the best way possible to not have to charge my consumers, my customers more, So scalability and how I work very much plays into economics and things like that. But in terms of slogan, our slogan is Ride Your Wave. That can mean whatever you want for you. That can mean follow your dreams, follow your passion, all things like that. Whatever you're after, keep chasing it, keep going after it. Because it's very much my North Star, my guideline too for our company, is how can we be a change maker in our industry, in what we do. Yes, we're small. Yes, we're an underdog. But to me, that doesn't matter. We can still make a difference, and we can still be a guidepost and a mover and shaker in how we do it and how we bring our business to life. So Ride Your Wave is very much an inspiration for you as it is for me and what I do every day. So.
Yeah, that really is a good message. I like that. Ride your way, because to different people, it's, be an individual, be yourself.
Yeah.
Do what you like or what you do best. And if it's enjoying the outdoors, the water, what we have here on Long Island, get into it.
Exactly. So, it can be very much a literal interpretation as it is, a creative one. It's what you want it to be.
And that's perfect. That's meaningful to everyone then.
You're young and your business is still young, but I could tell from some of our conversation before this show started that you have learned a lot and just you've had your business a couple of years, right? What was it like in the early days versus now? Like what's changed?
Oh God, the early days were hard, you knew nothing. But I jokingly say that there's like a curve, right? You You start out, you hit a couple things right, you're like, oh, I know everything. And then the going gets tough and the ground starts to shake beneath you and you hit a lot of bumps in the road and you realize it's a steep climb. And then you hit rock bottom and you say, well, I know nothing. But as you keep going, you realize, wow, I really do know a lot, and I keep growing and getting better and better and better. And then you look at the core competencies, your company has, and you build off that. Sometimes I jokingly say small is big and big is small, in the ways that as being a small business, we have this ability to connect with customers, connect with other humans in other ways that the big guys can't. So in essence, small can be big because our touch points, our authentic touch points, are way bigger. They're way greater. So, in the early days, my grandmother taught me how to sew. Just straight lines on a sewing machine, and it was rough. If you looked at the items, you weren't buying them. I mean, I wouldn't buy them. And nobody should. But that was my inspiration to keep getting better and better and better. And it was a lot of trial and error. I wasn't born into the apparel industry. I wasn't born into the textile market. I wasn't born into any of that. My parents didn't have a business. But I saw this ability to create from nothing. And to me, there's a very cool aspect of just looking at a flat piece of fabric, a flat textile, and saying, okay, if we add seams here, here, and here, and if we add a pocket here, and if we add a zipper, all of a sudden we go from nothing to, something. Mm-hmm. A blank canvas becomes full of life. And knowing that I always like to build things, it was a way for me to combine all of that. But the early days were a struggle, financially, physically, mentally. You beat yourself up. But then you realize that there's just enough people, whether it's family, friends, who will push you and just keep going, very costly in the beginning, but that's okay. A business is a journey, and you learn how to work smarter, better, more efficiently, and you realize that sometimes you don't have to be everything. Part of not being a conventionalist in the industry is, I would say, there's no true right answer. You let the market determine the answer. If the customers buy the product, that's your answer. If they don't buy the product, that's your answer too. And if the product doesn't wear well, wash well, look well after a little bit of testing, that's your answer too. So it's a step of iterations, But I jokingly say there's no better place I'd like to be than in the trenches, working each day, building items, saying, how can we make this better, more unique, all things like that.
I want to take a minute to remind our listeners that you are listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Stacy Raine, here with Bill Horan, and today our guest is Anthony Capellupo, the founder, owner, and CEO of the apparel company called Wakes and Waves, which is based out of East Rockaway here on Long Island.
And then just thinking when Stacy was asking you the other question, suppose someone listens to the show today and calls you up and said, I love the idea, I love your enthusiasm, and they show you a check and you can mentally fill in any number, 100,000, 500, a million, whatever, and I'd like to be your partner. What would you say to them?
I would say I think we would lose exactly who we are. Our authenticity of a homegrown brand, I think that's what that's the difference. I know that down the road, people might come to me and say that, and I've thought about it. Should I just take my hard work and, walk away? I have other businesses that I want to start too, and things like that. But to me, what's the purpose? To me, running this road, running this race, I hope inspires other people as much, as other people have inspired me. And to me, we can't be afraid of a challenge. We can't be afraid of what's hard, what's never been done before. Unconventional roads lead to great places. So if someone came to me with a check, I would say thank you, but no thank you.
Stacey, he won't take your money. You're going to have to put that $1 million check into another business. And the funny thing is, the reason I asked you that, we did have a guest. He came out with the plainest product in the world. They're all over the place. And he got a call from Mark Cuban. And he was literally much like, well, you're far ahead of him because he was working out of his garage. And he got a call from Mark Cuban. Mark didn't tell the other sharks on Shark Tank and said, here's $1.7 million. I want to invest in your company. So things like that do happen. So I hope you're serious about that.
I think investing is different than selling. I really do. I think that, but it would, even down that road would have to be right. Our homegrown authenticity, our connection to our customers, our connections to how we build our product and how we do it, would never change. So even if I somehow did have an investor down the road, I would focus on my scale locally and not offshore production or not outsource, and things like that. I think there's really something to be said, for a shop to market, just like a farm to table, supply chain. So I'm not opposed to,
See, he's getting you back in now. Keep the check hot.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to, potential investors, but selling is not an option.
No. We didn't want you to sell. We want you doing it because you're
So Mark
you're
Cuban
the
can
main
still give
person.
him a call.
Potentially.
Mark
There we
Cuban can
go.
still call. So you have a lot of thoughts about the world around you and the environment here on Long Island. Tell me about that and how you incorporate. I know you've talked a little bit about it, but what about minimizing waste? You talked about particular materials, but let's talk about the waste piece of it.
So in terms of waste, the ability when you have a vertically integrated supply chain, from almost start to finish, I can look at a piece of fabric, I can look at a 40-inch textile, 60-inch textile, 72-inch textile, and say, okay, how can we build an item where there's an inch left in the margin on either side? I can tailor that fabric, those cuts, those measurements in any way. But that's the cool thing is the ability to do that. But not by minimizing the waste, if I can get more out of something, it saves my customers money. Because by not having, if I have a 60-inch textile and a bag's going to be, it's going to be a giant bag, 36 inches across, all of a sudden I'm making one bag out of that, and now I have almost a 24-inch piece of remnant left over. Yeah, maybe I can make something smaller, but what's the trade-off? So in my opinion, a lot of how I work, a lot of the patterns I build are based off of minimizing the waste and then using any remnants we have left over, converting them into other products as well. Also, if you come to any one of our pop-up shops or events around Long Island, all of our displays are made from reclaimed wood, broken down driftwood, broken down shipping pallets, all things like that. And, early on, going back to the question of, how hard were the early days? Well, I jokingly say if I had all the money in the world, I would have bought the nicest displays you could ever find. But I quickly realized that had no charm. It had no connection. So I used to drive around some of the industrial areas, on the night of garbage, and I would find the broken shipping pallets, and I'd throw them in the trunk, and I'd say, oh, this is perfect, and I'd sand them down, I'd smash them apart, cut them apart, with circular saw or whatnot, and slowly but surely, that became very much a look and a distinct aspect of our brand that people love is they recognize us for that physical, tangible connection to, what's going on here. So yes, it's minimizing waste. On one hand, it's putting new life into what the ocean leaves behind or what other things leave behind. But that's very much how I think that we can include another element of the local built aspect to our brand and what we do. It's easy to call, a lumber yard, Home Depot, Lowe's, and say, okay, I want 40 pieces of plywood. I want 40 pieces of oak, mahogany, all things like that. That's easy to do, and if you have the money, it's easy to buy, but to me, rolling up your sleeves and putting the life back in what's left behind, is very cool as much as it adds a distinct look to our brand.
Yeah, for sure. So you've talked a lot about how you learned to make the products, which was a lot of trial and error, which I think is I love your approach to, you're very okay with that, the learning part. Was that the same way on the business side? So you've got your building the product, but then you've got your business side. How did you learn that? You said you didn't go to school for that. You weren't born into a family that does that. So what?
So my grandmother, when I had ideas for different there's a couple sides of this market. There's the artistic side where a lot of people will buy blank shirts and things like that, and they'll print on it and whatever. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's great. I think there are people who are tremendously talented artistically, and whatnot, and that's awesome, But for me, I wanted to reach for something different, more unique. And the first thing I did is I wanted to come up with a tote bag, something for the beach or things like that, with our logo and whatnot. And I'm researching around and things like that. And, you see minimum order quantities of 100, 200, 1,000. And then you start pricing it out. And not only did I not have the money, I didn't even know where to find the money. So I thought differently. My grandmother sold her sewing machine at a garage sale probably about 5 years before I even had the idea for Wakes and Waves. But I knew she knew how to sew. So this was during the height of the pandemic, and I ordered a Singer sewing machine. And it arrived, and I'm amazed it even arrived because this was a time when people were clamoring for PPE and anything garment, textile related to convert, their operations into, something else. So it arrived, and they didn't even put it in a brown box. It came in the Singer box. I was amazed it arrived. But it did nonetheless. And I said, hey, could you teach me how to sew? And she goes, you got to be kidding me. You're crazy. She goes, you're crazy. I said, no. I said, just show me. And she sat with me, and she taught me, and she might tell you now that after my hours and hours, I'm better than her, and maybe she's right, maybe she's wrong. I don't know. I'm not gonna say that because she taught me how to start. But that's how I learned, and it was straight lines on scrap fabric and things like that. That kind of all went from there, and a couple other people, whether it's places that repair machines, Simple Answers, looking for certain attachments, all things like that. You pick up little things, along the way.
You are listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Stacy Raine, here with Bill Horan, and today our guest is Anthony Capellupo, the founder, owner, and CEO of the apparel company called Wakes and Waves, which is based out of East Rockaway here on Long Island. And the main thing I was interested in, Anthony, was the business side of things. Like, how did you figure that piece out? I mean, you have such a great story, the artistic side. I love that.
So I studied economics at Fairfield, and, when I was there, there's so many different aspects to economics and business and whatnot. But I kind of knew that as much as I loved banking, as much as I love macro, all things like that, I wanted something more individual focused. So I started taking a lot of classes and doing a couple independent studies where you would be really hands-on. You'd be 10, 12 people in a class. You knew everybody by name, all things like that. And I loved it. But I would say that, there's all different ways to run a business. But for me specifically is how can you be efficient? How can you make a mistake and not have it cost you that much? How can you think smarter? But the business very much came from, I think, a little bit common sense. I think a little bit trying not to be everything. I jokingly say if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. So you have to choose what you're good at. And good businesses do that. Whether it's craft beer, whether it's local coffee shops, all things like that. You have to choose a niche and be efficient in your niche and not try to be everything. Because, you look at companies that try to be everything and then their efficiency rapidly decreases and there's no margin in the product. Profits are slim, and they, fold. They wrap up. You look at like Bed Bath & Beyond, that is continually closing stores and all things like that, and probably is not going to be here for much more. They say more than an online business, because there's a lot of overhead, and how can you be lean? How can you be efficient? But how can you have the pliability and agility to change when you need? That's another advantage of being small. When you get too big, your time to market vastly increases. When you lack vertical integration, your product creativity decreases. So that's very much the business aspect. The numbers are the numbers. They don't lie, right? You're either making money or you're not. And your job, in my opinion, as a business owner, is to balance the best things you can bring to the market at a reasonable cost for your customers at a strong enough profit margin for the company where you can pay your employees well and grow the business. Because if there's not enough margin, you're eventually going to be stuck in the same place. So it's a balancing act, and where do you move the needle in terms of everything? So I think a big thing in doing the business is being honest with yourself. I have not brought products to market because they're too expensive to make. There's been some products that I've brought to market that are low cost to make, but they're great and people love them.
Anthony, I've got to bring this question into the play here. Now you've attracted people. You've got us all excited about Wakes and Waves. Where do we get it? You said a flea market or is it a church sale?
I don't want to call it a flea market. I don't want to call it a church sale, but we travel around to different pop-up shops around the island.
Okay.
However, you can always go online and look where you can find us next. You can always shop online 24/7 and whatnot. I always do my best to offer holiday deals around, the holiday season.
Sounds
so people
good.
can enjoy that and whatnot.
And now the big reveal. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just have to know this. How soon until we see your products on Taylor Swift and Tom Brady?
That I don't know.
Kelsey.
Maybe, if we keep pushing, maybe tomorrow, right?
All right. See, nothing's going to stop this guy. We got to invest in it. Get that checkbook out again, Stacy.
Find that $1 million lying around somewhere.
It's been a lot of fun, Anthony. Thanks for being with us. We'd like our audience to know our guest has been Anthony Capellupo. He's the founder, the owner, and the CEO and the big boss of Wakes and Waves. New company right here on Long Island. Let's support him because he's going to be famous. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Horan. I'm here at Nassau Community College with Stacy Raine. We want to thank you for listening to this week's episode of My Hometown.
We like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to WHPC at ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.